Hello and welcome to Deep Dive Perspective, a show in which we try to bring on people with counter-political, counter-cultural narratives that really open up an avenue of thought, a critical thinking, which others perhaps have missed. And today I'm very honoured to have artists, creatives in our studio. And of course, the discussion is going to focus on resistance art, the kind of art which troubles establishment, the kind of art which actually challenges propaganda, challenges mainstream efforts to herd people in particular directions. So it's going to be an absolutely fascinating set of interviews, but please do like, subscribe and share the video. It's the only way we're going to get more people to ask the questions, the critical questions that are necessary to get to the truth. And with me in the studio, I have, first of all, Shahd Karaeen. Welcome, Shahd.
Hi, it's lovely being here, honestly, especially this is a beautiful platform, so we can share our voices.
Thank you very much. And Shahd, you're a poet, an author, writing books, presenting poetry, and a Palestinian one at that, with a particular passion and slant for resistance poetry, or poetry which celebrates Palestine. And I'm going to talk about Palestine and talk about your art in that context, your poetry. But I've also got online with us Natalie Papamichael. Natalie is also an artist, and I would say perhaps the foremost resistance artist that I know, certainly that I've come across globally today, to be fair. And it's really a lot of Natalie's work which challenges so many aspects of what's been happening, particularly over the last 4 or 5 years. Everything from addressing issues like COVID-19, addressing climate change, addressing issues of economic establishment, narratives, Agenda 2030, so many things going on which many artists could well shy away from or don't know about. Yet Natalie has done a fantastic job in exposing and sharing art based on that. Welcome to the show, Natalie.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
It's very kind of you to join us. And I'm going to contextualize this because art has extraordinary power. If I wanted to bring it to an everyday level, then there are memes across social media which seem far more powerful than many of the traditional forms of political agitation or even perhaps more formal ways of resisting tyranny. Artists have always been very much involved in the business of challenging authority and establishment. And the Dada movement in particular strikes me as one interesting example to perhaps focus on. And I'm going to have a little look at that movement, which was, pre-First World War, post-World War. It was looming as a form of expression of resistance to the norm of killing millions of young people, especially across Western Europe, and a very interesting movement to revisit, given our present day penchant for forever wars, which are also killing on a mass scale, mainly in West Asia, but well beyond that. So I'm going to start, first of all, with the bigger picture. Shahd, in terms of your particular perspective of resisting established norms and trends as a poet.
Yes.
Give us a little background, first of all, of how you've been going about it, and as a Palestinian poet.
It's very difficult because growing up, you're told, don't speak your mind, don't speak against the oppression. So for us, we were always quiet. We were doing it as artists. Growing up, I was always doing it behind closed door, writing behind closed door, but my father was vocal. He is a Palestinian author. He's a retired politician. So he always fought for the Palestinian cause. Growing up, I did watch him. He's very courageous. He used to stand on stage and share his poetry. It was about resilience and just basically fighting for the Palestinians' freedom. So for me, I was quiet and shy, and I couldn't really find my way. So it took me a while to actually use my words and use my poetry to speak against the injustice and the oppression that's happening back home.
Mm-hmm. And how do you feel? We're in the midst of what many would describe as a genocide, and
yes.
something which doesn't look like it's going to resolve itself anytime soon in terms of the Palestinian plight.
Yes.
Which is a 7-decade-long situation. How is your poetry or your art expressing itself in this time?
Do you know what's actually beautiful? That you see so many artists are actually collaborating together. They're coming together. And we are so powerful together. And that is so beautiful to see. Unfortunately, so many Palestinian lives, they died basically. But what we actually come across is unity. And there's solidarity everywhere now. So through it all, we realized that no, we can actually make a change. So many artists, musicians, poets, just everyone found a way to come together and start raising money for Gaza. So there's a huge change, honestly, especially as a Palestinian, where I couldn't actually feel comfortable being who I am. Now I don't really have to explain myself because everyone knows who we are. And it's quite rewarding because I honestly, genuinely believe there will be change. It's not going to happen overnight, but a lot of people see the light at the end of the tunnel, because before you couldn't, it was just impossible. And even my creative work, when I started basically going on stage, I could see how everyone looked at me in such a way where they weren't accepting. And gradually, slowly, I could see everyone kind of, their facial expression became welcoming, and they are friendly, and they want to open dialogue with us and just understand us more. So I've seen a huge change of unity. So yeah.
So your book, re-embroidered her resilient voice, is one of your books. I have the other one here, White Shoes, my
yes.
story without boundaries. These are all fascinating works of poetry. But
yeah.
will you recite something for us just to give
yes.
us a little context?
White Shoes means a lot to me because everything in that book is actually something that I've performed. I recited on stage. So this all this work I put together, and this book is going to charity. The profits go to Palestine in Gaza. So this book has helped quite a lot of people. So yeah, I would love to. I recited from this book all over the UK, and I traveled to Dublin. So yes.
Well, I'll let you share that perhaps in the next question that I come to. But it's fascinating to hear that Palestinian artists and other artists are beginning to come together. And at this juncture, I'm going to turn to Natalie. Natalie, of course, the Palestinian struggle is something which has been so well documented visually, and it's interesting that the way that social media and the general internet boom has allowed people within the Palestinian movement to share the visuals, to share their videography, and some of it, of course, really brutal and really grueling. And it's been very hard for what traditionally is a domain for mainstream Western media as a means of controlling narratives. It's been very hard for them to control this narrative over this last year, since October the 7th, certainly. And the hasbara that I'm used to often seeing trotted out without question on mainstream media hasn't been as effective. You as an artist, I mean, I'm not going to ask you to focus on Palestine particularly, but of course we've known each other in terms of your creativity and the work that you've done for maybe, well, 5 or 6 years now. And the first things I came across with yourself was artwork of the beheaded folk, very well-known characters from history. And I just thought Natalie is just like the first artist I've seen who's absolutely taking the bull by the horns and really literally throttling the establishment with her artwork. And we're going to see some examples of your art hopefully popping up while we're talking. But tell me about how you came to that kind of slant in your work, because you weren't always doing this. You weren't always doing resistance art, I imagine.
No, I guess initially I was doing a lot of feminist work, and then with the lockdowns, and I studied classical painting, and I was always looking for a way to sort of challenge things. But it was with the lockdown, I felt I had a skill that I had to use to try and show stuff up. And there was a lot of censorship. Obviously, there was loads of censorship going on straight from the start, which sort of I was quite shocked at that it was just so blatant and coming from people that you wouldn't expect it to come from. So it was a means of communicating. I felt I had a means of communicating that maybe could be put visually, that people maybe would look at and question more than in writing. And initially, especially on social media, I was doing paintings and I would put writing with it and information, and it just kept getting not seen at all. So then I just stopped with the writing, and then it became more important to try and communicate using the images and I've done a lot of headless people beheadings. It's quite funny because I think because I don't use words at all, it seems to pass by a lot and not get sort of banned or shadow banned. The only thing I think I got shadow banned was Matt Hancock with Goebbels. That got shadow banned. No, that got taken down. But and it's sort of just a way of sort of almost challenging and mocking and getting people to question. Like even with the headless things, people would say, why have you chopped his head off, for example? And it's feeding into other cultures. Like I've used the Wizard of Oz as a story for things. So it's mixing up different narratives.
And what's the reaction you're getting from people who do engage with your art? I'd be fascinated to hear how people react to it.
Generally, it's quite good. I mean, because I also, I did have actually on Instagram a Wizard of Oz fan who I think reported me and said I was disgusting. But generally, I think people do tend to look at the images, because what I've done, especially with the more recent images, is I've used quite bright colours. So a lot of my older work is more sort of the classical old masters, the chiaroscuro, the darker colours. Whereas with the more recent paintings, I try to draw people in. So you sort of look and it looks like a sort of really appealing image. And then you see like heads rolling around and sort of people hanging in a forest. And so a lot of the questions asked are mainly, why have I chosen to do this to these people? And also because because of the censorship, I began turning a lot of my paintings into clothing. Because it was a way of getting it seen, because it felt more important than with my other work, that it was to communicate, and it needed to be communicated quickly. So I started wearing it. So that is quite funny, because I do get comments or looks sometimes. Like, I mean, there was a woman with I had my Great Reset handbag on the train home, and this woman did sort of look in disgust and actually said, "That's disgusting." But I feel that's a positive, because people are actually looking and questioning.
Your subject matter is very challenging. I mean, because in a world where questioning things and understanding the deeper perspective, taking the deeper dive, as we like to do on this show, is almost a skill set in itself, where people have in a way been dumbed down not to do that deep dive thinking, and they for whatever reason. That may well be changing, because we're finding in podcast world now people are even beginning to want 2 to 3 hour interviews, which is fascinating, because people's attention span had actually been dumbed down to maybe 20 or 30 seconds on media in general. And I'm curious about the subject matter that you chose, which again is challenging, because a lot of people won't even have done their homework, done their research. So when you have this art popping up, talking about something like, say, for instance, you just mentioned the Great Reset. Now, most people still may not know what the Great Reset is. Tell me about your relationship with this kind of subject matter. It must have meant that you did some reading and some research yourself. How did you get to be able to say things about, for instance, World Economic Forum's and the United Nations push for Agenda 2030? And why was that a problem? Why did you think you've got to speak out against it through your art?
I think, it was right at the beginning of lockdown where I started questioning everything, like nothing made sense of to what they were saying or what was happening. And my initial paintings I was doing at home were these models in masks, and I titled it "How to Style a Plandemic," because it was actually in Vogue magazine, How to Style an Epidemic, which is absurd in itself. It's like, look, you've got a plague, but you've got to look good during the plague. It was nonsensical, and everything just didn't seem to add up. And so I came across, I think initially I would read, I think I read Off Guardian, which had a lot of quite good articles. And so I started looking into quite a lot the World Economic Forum. I bought a copy of Klaus Schwab's The Great Reset. And so everything, I did a lot of reading all about what they're trying to bring in. The World Economic Forum, the New World Order, COVID, the jabs. So I did a lot of reading at the beginning and sort of tried to find a way to communicate what I was reading and what was really going on with COVID and with lockdown, to get people to question when we were being censored so much. You couldn't say anything. So I did it visually, because you can't, with the painting, it's much hard, especially if I'm walking with my handbag, you can't tell me to put my handbag away. So it sort of was a means of communicating, the dark agenda that is going on, Agenda 2030. And I think, one of my first paintings was entitled The Great Reset. And it was referencing, because when I was at college, I looked very much at the German expressionistic films during the war, so the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. So I sort of did a mix of the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari with Schwab and Boris reading Lockstep, which has sort of basically got the plan in detail, the Rockefeller plan.
Well, absolutely fascinating. I'm going to come and revisit this again with you, but with this, Shahd, you can see that this is a journey of a fellow artist, and there's a lot of thinking. People think art just comes out of thin air, and it's all about perhaps your creative imagination.
Yeah.
But actually, there's a lot of reading. There's a lot of intellectual, cerebral work. There's a lot of research that goes in. Do you find that's how your poetry has emerged? Has it come from just experience and intuition, or are you a reader, and are you a geopolitical?
Can I just say something? I love how everyone found their calling in COVID, because everyone actually connected to who they are. Same with me, and a lot of people I've actually talked to, they said the same thing. It was a time of reflection, because I think COVID, it was a time where you had to kind of stop everything that you're doing. So for me, that time as well, it was like, okay, I need to read again, because as you know, I was a businesswoman, and then I had to slow down. And I was like, hold on, I actually love reading, and I love, basically for me, I love creating videos, and then I write poetry to go along with the videos that I create. And it's my passion. There's no purpose. It's not like I sit down and say, I wanna write about this certain topic, because no, for me, I could be driving, like I was telling the kids, even they see me washing the dishes, cooking, and I'm like, oh, stop. And then I go and start writing something. Like, Mom, are you writing again? So it's like, it just comes to you. I think, you have to have it within you, in your soul. Sometimes we dim it, and a lot of artists find the way they connect to that roots, because it is so deep, it's deep within. It's visual. It's not only about reading. Reading is important, but you have to have that bond with some sort of connection. For example, when I think of a story, I actually visualize every single thing. I can smell it. I can actually feel it. So for me, And sometimes I don't like to get distracted. I'm like, when I'm writing or creating, I tell my children, just please give me space because I'm actually in the story. So it's actually a beautiful world to be an artist and creative. It's wonderful.
Well, your background is fascinating because your father, who you've mentioned a couple of times, was very close to Yasser Arafat.
Yes.
You know, the PLO leader,
Yes.
and a hugely controversial figure throughout his life, branded as a terrorist for most of his life as well.
Yeah.
But those kinds of characters that you grew up watching, how much have they influenced you? How much has their resistance influenced what you're doing now?
To be honest, quite a lot, because for me, it's very normal to be doing what I'm doing. It feels, because I grew up watching my father do it. I met Yasser Arafat so many times. There's always a risk. I grew up fearful. There's constantly that, yeah, we're going to go up, but maybe we might get attacked, or maybe my father will not return home. So I grew up being so used to being anxious about what if we don't make it tomorrow. So for me, it's like, this is actually enjoyable to be able to represent my people away from oppression, because I don't have to think what if, because I'm here. And I do believe we are shadow banned, like Natalie experience. I am shadow banned. And the funny thing is, because how can they shadow ban artists as creative individuals? I mean, it's so beautiful. Her work, I just looked at, briefly.
Yes,
it's
they're
amazing.
in front of us. Yes.
I mean, this is what needs to be celebrated. This is what I want to see. I don't want to see nowadays the meaning of art is being diminished. I have not witnessed the meaning of art that gets a lot of views, gets a lot of shares. Honestly, I do not relate to any of it. I'm thinking, where is the intellectual people that, they want to learn and want to grow? But again, Mohsen, do not forget, people are scared of challenge. People are comfortable where they are. People feel that the more they question, the more unhappy they will be. Because a lot of people don't understand what they're doing, because it's like a path they have to follow because they're told to follow. But us, we actually want to be we are awake in a sense. We want to leave that box that basically, I don't want to be categorized. Okay, Shahad, she's the Palestinian in the box. You have to challenge yourself and ask yourself questions, and why. And it seems like at times these type of questions make people very uncomfortable because they're not ready. They're not ready to embrace who they are. And once you try, they see that you are embracing who you are, they start to put you down. So, but I honestly think once you find your passion and your calling and your resilience, you actually feel confident that you want to share the love through your art, and it's who you are. I don't want to be the same as, everyone is different. Artists are unique. To be an artist is basically you have to connect with another artist and learn from each other.
I'm going to take you back a little bit to something you said, which is fascinating. You grew up in East Jerusalem,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
So that period interests me because censorship today, of course, is now very blatant in terms of, and Natalie's confirmed it, many other artists, many other people who are in the business of telling the truth have been shadow banned, have been censored, have been deplatformed, or, they've basically been subjected to a kind of media tyranny in a so-called freedom-loving society, even here in the West. And most of these platforms, like your Facebooks and they've got fact checkers who basically have connections, for instance, to Israel. I know for a fact that there is a former minister of the Israeli government who's on the fact checkers fraternity, and it's clear that there are therefore potential agendas. Now, East Jerusalem was essentially now what everybody acknowledges and recognizes to be an apartheid environment, an apartheid state, an
100%.
apartheid city. Tell me what it was like for your father, or people like Mahmoud Darwish. What reaction were they getting? How was the state of Israel dealing with artists as you grew up and today?
They see artists as terrorists. Honestly, they see every artist that means you're against the government. They don't like it. So I mean, it's hard enough to be born in your homeland, in your own country, and you don't have even a passport. I mean, it's humiliating. I had a travel document. Palestinians who born in East Jerusalem, they don't carry a full-fledged passport. That's just one example of many. And but the thing is, the sad part, it's like abuse and trauma. You're used to it. Everyone used to it. So you don't go up questioning it. You just know, okay, this is not normal, but it's okay. Why do you think Palestinians are very resilient? Because they are just thinking, oh, we're so glad we're alive. We made it today. Oh, we're glad we have a glass of water. Because we've been so humiliated, basically treated like animals. For us to actually be able to sleep the night in peace is a blessing. So that's why you see them saying, Alhamdulillah, oh, at least, my son is alive, at least, because we are used to it. Even though East Jerusalem, we haven't experienced what people in the West Bank have experienced and still are. But we are used to this type of treatment that for us, it just feels normal. So when, for example, you abuse someone for many, many years, and they're born into that abuse, born into this humiliation and prejudice, you're used to it. So you don't know any better. The only way I knew, honestly speaking, is when I left home. When I left home, I came on at the age of 16 to the UK art trip. And then I saw how liberated London is, and I saw how everyone is treated. And I actually said, oh, wow, is this how people are treated? Is this how I'm? And I loved it. And I never felt this type of love and respect. So a lot of people back home are like that. They just get used to it.
Well, Natalie, I'm going to bring you back on this because, Shahd talks about coming to Britain and feeling liberated, relatively speaking, to a clearly Zionist apartheid kind of environment that she grew up in, clearly an extremist environment. And there seemed to be terrorism inflicted on even the artists who were there. Of course, here in Britain now, the worry is that increasingly, as we get to a surveillance capitalism and hyper surveillance capitalism in an age where AI, robotics, and all sorts of other information technology, data sort of hoovering is going on, there is a danger of backdoor totalitarianism done through oligarchs, etc., which is rising. And your artwork has been addressing, of course, through the Agenda 2030 narrative, through the the COVID exposure narratives that you have, and even the climate change. There are a lot of agendas, a lot of policies which get pushed as if they're coming from the grassroots, but actually they're state-sponsored, they're corporate interest-related, and your artwork has been challenging that. That makes you potentially a target for the authorities as somebody who's taking on such huge exposés of things which are going on in lives. Have you felt the heat of establishment? Because the people who are, for instance, campaigning for Palestine right now, the likes of Chris Nynam and others who are part of Stop the War, Sarah Wilkinson on Twitter and beyond, who have been fighting for the Palestinians, they're certainly feeling the heat because they're being arrested, their houses are being raided, their doors are being smashed down, their homes are being ransacked, and there's a threat being pushed forward by establishment, be it Labour or Tory, doesn't matter which side. They all seem to be on this agenda for somehow quashing and suppressing voices. How do you feel about that as an artist in what is supposed to be a freedom-loving nation? We're supposed to be having the liberty as our cornerstone. Where are we going with all this, and how does your art kind of get affected by this?
Yeah, I think the reason I'm sort of left alone a bit is I'm not high profile enough to bother with, I feel. So I think that's sort of why I just remain a bit under the radar. I mean, I think the importance as an artist is you just keep speaking the truth, no matter what. I've sort of, with the latest painting I'm doing, it's quite interesting because when I studied feminism, it was about the personal is political. So everything is political. Everything we do is political to some degree. And I'm looking again at the surveillance society, and I'm reading Foucault. I was looking again at Foucault, which I studied before, Discipline and Punish. And the way we're living, it's just very, all these things being introduced just by stealth. And it's like, you see what's happening in the States by a digital, pushing all these agendas. It's sort of almost impossible to keep up with it. So somehow I'm trying to communicate at a speed and keep up with saying everything, because and I feel there's a big divide and rule happening as well. That divide and conquer is going very well, because there's a lot of division happening with people you thought were on the side of sort of good and freedom that suddenly seem to be okay with Zionism and genocide. So it's sort of a lot happening. But it's just, with my work, it's just constantly looking at ways to communicate it and to get people thinking. So the painting I'm doing at the minute is actually just it's like a juxtaposition with the wildfires in Los Angeles, and just me in the snow outside my flat. But where we live, our flat is sort of in the shape of the panopticon, Bentham's panopticon, where you're constantly being watched, which was the idea for the prison, and the CCTV. So it's sort of putting these two together, which is also linking the smart cities. So however these fires are starting, or whether it's due, whether it's arson or whatever it is, the agenda is obviously to create a new smart city. So it's sort of trying to communicate this, but I feel you just got to keep doing it, really.
Well, I think that's it's extraordinary that you're covering so many topics. And what's also extraordinary is that art can actually do that. In one picture, you can often bring together things in a way that writing perhaps can't. Poetry might be able to do it to some extent, but art, they do say, what is it? You can paint 1,000 words in a picture or something like that, just words to that effect. But let me just focus on these different strands that you've been particularly highlighting. It gives people maybe an opportunity to go and do some more research on these things. But and I'll relate it to Palestine as well, because when you talk about the Agenda 2030, what comes to my mind is primarily control and depopulation. Those are two themes that I can sum up a lot of what seems to be happening. But the language which, say, the United Nations, or the language which establishment uses within Agenda 2030, it's all about equality. It's about women's rights. It's about bringing health, for instance. It's about changing the environment for the better. I mean, I could go on, and there are all of these kinds of wonderfully flowery terms about how they're going to make things, better for people. But hidden within that message, what I've deciphered, and what many people who are very, very nervous about these agendas and these policies, is that everything is loaded in a slightly different way. So when you talk about equality, actually what you're doing is also talking about undermining, for instance, traditional family, and also attacking patriarchy to the point where men potentially become emasculated, and weaponizing feminism, which you're obviously you advocated, but again, a great cause. But to what extent does it become politically weaponized when it's in the hands of strategists sitting in an establishment or corporate agencies? And we know that the likes of BlackRock have policies, huge financial companies that have the ability to make companies operate on certain cultural perspectives, and they have huge budgets for pumping out propaganda making people conform to certain narratives. And I think one of those, of course, I've mentioned there for you, obviously, is around, I guess, the Agenda 2030, but the environment and climate is one as well. Climate change, for instance, they'll talk about global warming and cutting out global warming or challenging the climate change. Whereas for me, sorting out the environment, stopping the cutting of trees, destroying of the Amazon, cleaning up our environment, that's cool. But then the climate, they seem to focus on climate change. They focus on this idea of carbon dioxide and net zero, which suddenly becomes more to do with corporate agendas, in my opinion, than the actual agenda that should be there for changing environment. Similarly with women's rights, their idea of women's rights doesn't seem to be the idea that originally was there in terms of the suffragettes and raising women's rights. What do you think about those agendas that you've come across? Well, what's your thought?
Yeah, I agree totally. Yeah, I'm researching obviously the climate change thing, and even if many years ago, I watched a documentary film. It was called The Corporation. Really good. And it was quite chilling. I mean, because it was basically the corporations basically want to own the air we breathe and we pay for it. And that's pretty much what is happening. Everything is being corporatized. And even if we look at, if people just do research into stuff, for example, wind farms being built off the coast, who owns the sea? Oh, the monarchy. So we pay the people pushing the agenda are making money from the agenda. It's like you can buy yourself out of it, and that's sort of and let's look at the lithium. Let's look at the wind farms destroying nature. Let's look at the trees being chopped down. If you just look at it, because I have got a painting planned of that, of showing the reality of what they're doing. They're destroying the environment. It's not about climate change. It's about money. Obviously, we'll fly our jets, but you stay where you are, because you don't want to, because of climate change. So it's all these corporate agendas being pushed and creating more division as well. They what they proclaim to do, they do the opposite of.
Well, the Dada movement, I'm going to bring that bit back because I mentioned that at the start of the program, and I think having studied it very in a very basic way, it does seem to be a very clearly thought out opposition to establishment agendas. Do you think artists and the creatives need now to take these agendas which are going on of forever wars, the Agenda 2030 in terms of rolling out Malthusian notions of reducing populations, the breakup of family, society, community, the changes that are coming due to AI and the increasing reduction of privacy and liberty generally, just this general march towards a kind of world which I think that we thought we'd left behind when we talked about fascism and neo-Nazism. It seems as though it's being made fashionable now. Hitler Nazi-style salutes from Elon Musk being made normalized and then putting it down to his autism. I mean, there seem to be a lot of things that are going on which look rather suspicious within that fraternity. But tell me what your thoughts are around how artists should frame their movement. I mean, not just the artwork. The Dada movement actually thought in terms of manifestos. Maybe that's something that you might want to think about, an art manifesto, and thinking more in terms of rallying resistance artists to say, look, we're going to challenge this. We're not just going to do it individually, but we should get together more and more. Do you think there's scope for that behavior?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's also it's quite interesting with Dada, because also I think they moved away from realism because of the war, because they didn't want to represent this reality. And it's quite tricky because it's gone sort of to this extreme, whereas anyone can be an artist, with Duchamp Reinhold that was put in a gallery. So it was this sort of, but again, it's been bought out. It's so I think for me, it's getting back to skill again as well. And definitely the idea of a manifesto, the idea of a community, again, building on the opposite of what is being enforced today, which is division, isolation, de-skilling, and all these things. I would say that is a hugely important thing for an artist to do.
Coming to you, Shahd, I see Gaza slightly differently from many people at the moment, in the sense that when we talk about Agenda 2030, we talk about Malthus's depopulation agendas. We talk about experimenting on 15-minute cities, which are all part of this agenda. We talk about the ecocide that's gone on in Palestine by the Israeli IDF and other forces. We talk about, if we talk even about, the number of children who are now amputees, the biggest number of amputated children exist in Gaza, in history, in the world. And all of these are shocking statistics. And we talk about AI, the use of AI, again, a big push that Donald Trump has said he's going to do now in America. There's billions being invested in this new business of AI, and AI can draw. You've got artwork coming, which is AI related. There's this amazing new period that we've got to really be aware of. But Gaza in particular seems to me to be potentially a testing ground, almost an experiment, because there was a system called the Lavender system, the AI Lavender military system, which literally could pick out individuals in Gaza and target them. So you saw journalists being killed in the hundreds. More journalists are being killed in this conflict than any other conflict we know in the shortest period of time. Yeah. So there's a lot of firsts going on in this. And it does seem as though even the Israeli soldiers using selfies and using social media as a way of showing off their kills and their detonation of these entire areas. It does seem a dystopian reflection of a lot of what I hear in terms of what Natalie's talked about with Agenda 2030, all being inflicted on this small population of 1 or 2 million people in Gaza. If that is an experiment, then that becomes a next level of actual, what I would call terrorism, eco-terrorism, political terrorism, cultural terrorism, social terrorism, and of course military terrorism, economic terrorism inflicted on these people. If that's the case, I mean, is that something you want to pursue in terms of your creative expression of that? Is it something you think of?
To be honest, they wouldn't get away doing it to anyone else. They know they can get away with doing this to Palestinians. I mean, it's horrendous knowing that you are watching every day, killing of the innocent children, families, and so on and on and on, a genocide. But this just shows you what they see Palestinians as. They just think, we can get away with it. We can wipe them out. Just wipe them. They shouldn't exist. Palestinians shouldn't exist. So for me, it does not surprise us, to be honest. But we know that the best place to do it was in Gaza, because they have a lot of support, and they can keep doing it. They tried, they tested, no one could stop it, and they carried on. So, and also I've been speaking to women inside Gaza, and they were telling me they don't understand what's going on. They don't see our solidarity. They don't see basically outside of Gaza what they see. They're saying, how is it that they are getting away with murdering us every single day? They don't understand. They don't understand. They're being basically live stream all over the world. And it's really funny that I have to mention Trump mentioning that, he saw a picture of Gaza demolished. He says he said a picture that I couldn't believe it. So it's not being basically to say that all this time he only managed to see a picture of what's happening in Gaza. So it just doesn't make sense, because unfortunately they are in power, and Palestinian people have worldwide solidarity. But the question, is it enough? Are we protected? Are people in Gaza protected? For example, just a few days ago had the ceasefire agreement, but no, they still were shooting, killing. And then I spoke to people from back home, and they said they actually went to different areas in West Bank. They started killing other areas. So this is a show. It's like, look at us. Yeah, we're going to do a ceasefire. But that's the thing. How can you live with people you can't trust? They cannot keep their words. So for us, when we said, oh, we're saying, oh, wow, they're telling me congratulations, your people, the war stopped. I said, no.
There's no ceasefire because they went to Jenin and they've been killing people in the West Bank as well.
They don't want us to live in peace. Honestly, we really want to live in peace. We just want to live side by side. We never had a problem with that, but they don't want it. This
cultural aspect, when people are being bombed, killed, destroyed, and when they're the victims of a demoralization and a fear-based campaign, terrorism, a very kind I talked about, you'd have thought that art or creativity would be the last thing in the minds of the people here, traumatized people under pressure. How does art function within that environment? Is it even possible? I mean, I understand that the culture, for instance, food, Palestinian food, falafel, even that's been appropriated often by Israelis to say it's ours. Hummus, falafel, these things. The olive tree, a cultural expression of the...
They can't even get along with us, to share food. Or, it's like, no, that's ours. No, that's, it feels a bit childish at the same time, doesn't it? It's like, that's mine. It's just, do you know what it is? They made up their minds. They just said, okay, we don't want Palestinians, full stop. They don't want us to be there. So what they're trying to do, for instance, I know moving away from your question, but what they do to people like me, once you leave home on a travel document, okay, you move away and then you get, for example, British passport. They find out that I have a British passport. So what they did, when I went back home, they basically found out, and they told me, you're not a resident anymore because you have a British passport. So you hear stories where people in America, because they're Jewish, they actually invite them into my country and say, you know what, you are a resident now, you can live here. But me, born and raised, they took away my identity. So right now, I only have a British passport. And when I go back home, I won't have any rights, basically, to even live there like everyone else.
Well, we're coming to the end of the program. I could carry on for at least another hour because it's such a fascinating topic and more questions come to mind. But we'll bring you back again. But injustice sounds to me like the central word. And the cultural resistance to injustice. Traditionally, I mean, in Western culture, rap, hip-hop began as resistance culture and was hijacked often by mainstream, if you like, corporate forces, and has turned into guns and sex and rock and roll kind of, well, not rock and roll, but rap culture. It's become something different from what it was. The Soviet Union, when it had its Leninist revolution back then, also had an interesting art that was related to it, very much art that was all to do with workers and workers' rights, hammers, anvils. There was a certain expression, there's a sort of mood there within that as well. And those were propaganda exercises, clearly. And coming back to cultural resistance to injustice, today, Natalie, would you be, I mean, to come out with something positive from this, given that there's oppression going on, do you think that there is a possibility for artists like you and for, of course, Shahd here to get together and perhaps create a more organized front where creatives could help each other, support each other, help the oppressed like the Palestinians, because they're not the only oppressed, there are many other oppressed around the world, and help them to channel their cultural expression, their creative expression in being able to resist, because resistance isn't just about armed resistance, it's much more than that. Do you think there's scope for us doing that, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
I mean, in Britain at the moment, I don't see a visible sign of that. I see people all individually working on that. What are the kind of steps that you think that we might be able to take to sort of achieve that?
I guess the first thing is communication. I mean, I am someone started something in Australia, actually, another artist, which is his sort of thing, which is what my necklace is like, fuck the New World Order. He started this. So there are sort of, as you say, it's more isolated, it's more getting people together somehow. And maybe the idea of a manifesto and a shared sort of vision of what one foresees within the different strands of everything.
Would galleries give you space? Because when you have control, I know that the Stop the War movement is limited in terms of the kind of spaces it can go and even hold meetings. So formal spaces, corporate-run spaces, state-run spaces would also censor you. So do you think there's also a problem in terms of being able to get together like this? Are there challenges that you might face?
There are challenges. I mean, I've actually rather strangely been offered an exhibition in central London in a gallery for whatever work I want to show. So a solo exhibition, which is quite good because I have my early work, so if it was solely my political work, then I feel sort of like the book. I've got one audience, but I want other people to see it that are not the people that know everything as well. Because obviously that's who I want to communicate with too. So it's having a mix of stuff also gets different people through the door. So I think it's sort of, there are ways.
So, and Shahd, you were today at a meeting where artists were gathering and you presented some of your poetry. I'd like to hear, I mean, we're coming to the end of the show.
Yes.
So it'd be lovely to hear a couple of stanzas, a couple of lines of your poetry, and also just then to look at how the audience reacted in an artistic space. How did they react to your Palestinian resistance poetry?
They actually told me that they loved my delivery. The reason is because I basically advocate for peace. So I think when you are sharing your art and work, people tend to connect with you if you are trying to spread peace. It send a message, basically, please, everyone, we want freedom and we want justice. It's just basically being friendly in a way, saying, look, this is who we are. We're just humans, just like you. Please let us in and listen to our stories. So they actually, the thing is, I can't comment about my poetry, but from what they say, they said to me, they got the message in a way, not I'm taking sides somehow. It's basically, it was an open message to all, not only to to Palestinians that they're oppressed worldwide. It was worldwide message for peace. So yes.
So it was, and I think if there are a couple of stanzas, maybe now's the time.
I'll do the white shoes one.
Oh, you want to do it for white shoes? Okay, let's do a swap.
That's about Palestine.
Let's do a little swap then, yeah.
And basically, so this one means a lot because I feel as artists, we shouldn't give up. We should keep using our creative work to spread our message across, to everyone. So even Natalie, don't give up, keep going, because that's unique. So this one is called Hope as Day Awakes. Hope in the sunshine as day awakes. Hope in the sunset as twilight takes. Hope in the waking of a brand new morn. Hope in the eyes of someone you adore. Hope in the loved ones as they lay buried in peace. Hope in the children running, playing after the seas. Hope in the world as solidarity rises. Hope in believing, united we go marching. Hope in humanity as voices awake. Hope in a future where love's embrace takes.
Fantastic, that's beautiful. Natalie, your reaction to that, and on that we're going to conclude.
Yeah, really beautiful. Amazing.
Well, it's lovely to have two great artists and have a chance to discuss things which are very serious, but also from a very cultural and creative perspective. And thank you both for joining me on this edition of the Deep Dive Perspective. It's been an amazing journey listening to just two artists who are out there clearly with a message of hope and clearly with a bravery as well, because it takes bravery to stand up to systems and to establishment, to go against the grain. It also is a really important lesson. The one thing I always find about artists and creativity is that in schools and in general, there is a trend not to really push the arts, not to really let young people express themselves in creative and, I guess, intuitive ways. And intuition, creativity, critical thinking, and critical reasoning expressed through art is an extraordinarily liberating process, whether it's through poetry or whether it's through art or through filmmaking or through any other medium of creativity. And in fact, it's where the future lies. For those who want to always link economics to their reality, well, we're coming into an age now where the reality is this, that the old school jobs are not going to be there. AI is coming, and it's coming in a huge way. Content is king, creativity is powerful. And for young people, if I have a message, then you see all this injustice around the world. Your reaction to it, your content, your creativity has never been more important. It's never been more powerful, potentially in terms of its reach, with billions now on the online space, the internet space. You need to really, I think, focus your careers very much in a direction of recognizing your own selves and developing yourselves in a way that actually you become the voices. Don't look to the corporations, don't look to the governments and the state. Make yourselves the voices that the world wants to hear. And the more of you there are, the more I think you will impact the psychology and the mentality and the society at large. And you will be an antidote to the demoralization and to the fear and to the tyranny and the oppression, which seems to be something which both state and corporations seem increasingly hell-bent upon making our reality in the 21st century. It's up to us to change it. Thank you for watching this edition of the Deep Dive Perspective. Please like, share and subscribe to that button, and we'll pop up the books of both Natalie Papamichael and Shahad for you to basically be able to buy online. Do go and find them. They're fantastic works, and you can see Natalie's work sitting right behind her. Absolutely amazing artists, amazing to share time with them. And I'm sure we'll have them on again. Thank you for watching.